What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today we're going to take a look at the top 4 from this week's community gaming tournament, as well as the Marvel Snap metagame as a whole. And to rewind things back a little bit, this tournament took place before last week's OTA patch, so a few things have changed. And also, speaking of change, I've got a green screen behind me now, so let me know what you think of the new setup. I also have something else behind me, but that's just a little bit of a tease for right now. Let's get on to these deck lists, and in 4th place we had Flishwap playing Spectrum Ongoing, and this is a pretty powerful list. A few things have lost power, Luke Cage and Spectrum, since the OTA, but a big strength for this deck was Leech, was a 4-cost card last week. And so the most powerful things that you could be doing weren't on reveal abilities, it was ongoing abilities. And because of that, Spectrum just made a lot of sense because Leech did not interact with any of the other cards in this deck. Of course, it does still shut down Spectrum, kind of like the namesake card, but everything else can still remain unscathed here. And one thing that I have to point out is last week I said no one was playing Miss Marvel, and that seemed like kind of a mistake, so I do feel vindicated in that Miss Marvel is now seeing some play. We also see the somewhat recently buffed US Agent as well as Claw in this deck list. Both of these really powerful ongoing abilities now. And then Jean Grey is like just enough interaction to throw people off their game, along with Cosmo to still make the people that are trying on reveal abilities have to play fair. In 3rd place, another deck that has been picking up a lot of steam recently is Ravonna Lockdown, which is mainly typically just using Ravonna to get out a cheaper Professor X, and then also Green Goblin and Hobgoblin. Though I do want to say one other thing I brought up in last week's video was the synergy between Ravonna and Angela. Just to be able to play a 1/6 effectively off your Ravonna seems pretty good. And now, of course, Ravonna has access to Sage as a new card, and they've also thrown in Wolfsbane in a lot of lists like this one seen here by Lukehead. So this list is pretty dynamic, has a lot of different things going on, but it's really just trying to junk your opponent, and there's some huge overlap in synergy with junking your opponent and then making a large Sage, because Sage can count your opponent's White Widow, and it can force your opponent to play to specific locations with either Nebula or Professor X, limiting your opponent's realistic options, which just means Sage is bigger. And then Green Goblin also kind of grows by Sage, yeah, because it counts other cards at the location. Double checking because I am not super familiar with Sage. And then of course we do see the combination of Professor X and Cannonball, which is remaining pretty strong, with Hope Summers allowing you to also play like Cannonball plus Jeff on the final turn, or maybe, yeah, that's basically it really. I mean, maybe Cannonball plus either Sage or Wolfsbane if you play like 2 things into Hope Summers. That's a little bit trickier to do, but definitely still possible. And then in 2nd place we have Darkhawk, which is another deck that has not been super popular recently, but the Marvel Snap devs have said is a pretty solid force as far as win rates and cube rates and those metrics are concerned. And the most common thing that I've been seeing Darkhawk paired with recently is this Black Bolt plus Stature combo, because you want to play something else alongside your Darkhawk on the final turn of the game. You don't really want that to be Korg or Nico. You're fine if it's a demon though, but Stature at a 1-cost card after being reduced by either Black Bolt or Silver Samurai is pretty good on that final turn of the game. And then another power cost 5-drop here that has not, this has like 0 metrics right now on Untapped, or at least did last week at the time of this tournament. I think that this card is picked up a little bit, but Legion from Claire Saint here is a really fantastic card, just bang for your buck if you are sliding in a Stature or a Demon alongside it. So return to form for Legion is pretty cool. That's this deck's main interaction, though there is Killmonger, and Killmonger's doing stuff. I mean, both of the 2 decks we just looked at are playing Nebula, And I guess spoiler alert, we've got a Thanos deck coming up in just a second. So Killmonger doing pretty good work among this top 4, but Killmonger is also here. I mean, it cleans up your hood. It also cleans up your Maru Masa shard from Dakin, which can also get discarded by Silver Samurai. Silver Samurai paired with Black Bolt here, both of which able to make stature a little bit cheaper, but also offer a little bit of interesting disruption right now. Now, these cards will hit rocks if your opponent picks up any rocks from Korg or Rockslide, and that is one thing that has always given me a little bit of pause in these Darkhawk decks playing these discard cards, because there's a little bit of a non-synergy there. But otherwise, if your opponent hasn't picked up any rocks yet, Silver Samurai is really good at making your opponent discard actual cards. Like, they might have to 50-50 discard a rock or a sage. So that's kind of cool. A lot of the times, and what this is kind of here for, is to hit Professor X on turn 4. So that way you get it out of their hand before turn 5. I suppose if they don't have Ravonna. If they have Ravonna, then they might be slamming a Professor alongside of it. And then Black Bolt, making your opponent discard their lowest power card. I guess that'll hit like a Green Goblin. I mean, turn 5, it's not, you're just like getting what's left. It's not typically meaningful disruption, but it's a 5/7 that comes along with it a cheap stature if you have that combo. And moving on to our winner was Rain Snap. I teased this already. They were playing Thanos, but not just any Thanos list here. Thanos, I mean, I would say mostly a pretty straightforward list, but also Loki as an interesting way to kind of change up your draws if you don't like what you have. Also Magneto at the top of the curve. Potentially a concession to going like a little bit more tech heavy with both Shadow King and Mobius in this list, not wanting to run I just blanked on the name of it. Not wanting to run Blob. Maybe Sasquatch could be a good card to include in this list next week when everyone else gets their hand on it. I'll tell you what's going on now. I am doing the community video this week for Sasquatch to spotlight that card. Probably, most likely. I am still technically editing that together and it hasn't been submitted and approved by Marvel Snap, but really, really cool opportunity. Happy to be able to put that together, and I'm gonna do some type of giveaway in this video. I haven't figured out exactly what that'll be, but at the end of the video, I will talk about more details for that. One other thing that I wanted to draw some attention to with this Thanos performance from Rain Snap, in the finals, they defeated Darkhawk, which if we take a look at the matchups matrix here on untapped.gg, we can see that Darkhawk typically beats Thanos with a 48% win rate. That's of course because the Darkhawk gets that additional power from the stones starting in a Thanos deck, which is sometimes offset by Blob, but we don't even see Blob in this Thanos list here from Rain Snap. So really great performance. They also did a little bit of an upset against Lockdown, which is typically pretty good against Thanos because Thanos has so many stones and things to play, though Thanos does play Jeff and Vision and stuff, so does have some maneuverability along with that. But one thing was definitely a big upset here. We can see that Lockdown defeating Ongoing, and this makes sense because you lock down some locations with Professor X and things, and then they find ways to claw their way back into it. You can potentially mess up Miss Marvel with Green Goblin, but again, Miss Marvel's another way to just get additional power into those side locations even if they're locked down. So Lockdown defeating the Spectrum Ongoing list was definitely a big upset there, but that just shows you not everything is going to be communicated in the data. You still got to play the games. But I also love diving into the data as well. So you can find a link to this spreadsheet in the video description, but I totaled up how many times each card appeared in all of these 66 different deck lists that players played this week. And you can also see that number as a percentage. and how that number has trended compared to last week's data. I'm only looking at this week and last week for now, but as the weeks go on and maybe as I get better at Excel, I'll figure out some other way to kind of collect this data and take a look at trends and things. But for right now, let's just look at the cards, see how they trended, and talk about how they played out this week. We can see that Jeff actually went up despite being the most played card last week as well. There were 30 copies of Jeff last week and 34 copies this week. That actually makes sense considering Professor X also went up a pretty healthy margin, and Jeff is both good with Professor X and against Professor X. So either side of that, you're going to just want Jeff in your deck, and it's just an incredibly flexible card. No surprise to me that it is the still most played card, but now we are at above 50%, which might be a little bit much. And it's interesting because Professor X is like kind of an annoying card. Nobody ever complains about Jeff. I don't personally love Jeff. I don't love how ubiquitous it is and how much it just dominates the space for best 2-cost card. You can see that we are now labeling which the energy cost of all cards. That's just for me to be able to sort things easier, but we could definitely sort through the different, maybe we'll do that after we just look at by appearances, and we'll take a look at by shift as well. But we're just on the first card. Let's keep it going. I wanted to draw some attention to Nocturne, which sees an increase from 12 to 18, an almost 10% increase this week. Definitely a lot, but no Nocturnes in those top 4 lists that we just looked at. Mobius makes sense. Shang-Chi, actually both of these went down despite actually seeing more play in the top 4 this week. Maybe Mobius actually did see less play in the top 4, but Shang-Chi was not in the top 4 last week, and these are some of the most powerful flex spots in the game. And we saw actually an increase in Loki, which is pretty incredible because this is like, these cards I would say can go in any deck, but then, and Angela too, but then once we get into Loki, Quinjet, Cable gets played in 2 different decks, so I understand why Cable is high, but Loki is it's surprising to see that number so high until you realize this event was won by a player playing Loki not in a Loki deck, just throwing Loki into an existing deck. Now there is some synergy with Mind Stone. Mind Stone adds multiple cards to your hand. That can be useful for Loki, but otherwise Loki was just kind of thrown in as a good card. And I've kind of talked about Loki as just a good card a little bit in the past when I played Anaya Loki, as just a way for Loki to kind of smooth out your bad draws. And that I do believe is what was going on in the Thanos list that we saw. And we can jump back to that for a second. That's fine. So basically, Loki is really good if you draw like a random hodgepodge of things. Either like you don't draw any of your stones, so you just have these really expensive cards in your hand. You also have the ability to Psylocke out a Loki on turn 3. I don't think that that is as useful as using Hope Summers and then Loki turn 4 to then have 6 energy plus the reduced cost of Loki on turn 5. I think that can be pretty good. I think that if you have like some weird stuff going on with like Professor and like not Jeff or just not good setups, basically there's cards that you have in this deck that might be bad and you might want to get rid of them with Loki. So I think people starting to maybe get onto that idea of Loki as just an interesting card to smooth out your bad draws is why we're actually seeing an increase in it, despite it not winning last week. But obviously Loki is still a really good card and one of the cornerstones of Marvel Snap. So just talking on that because like multiple weeks now, I think this is the 5th week that Loki has been the most represented archetype card in these tournaments. And I think that competitive players kind of gravitate towards Loki a little bit as well, because it's basically the closest thing to like a Serra deck right now in terms of letting you make a lot of decisions on the final turns, which makes players feel like they have a lot of control over what's going on in the game. But moving along, the next archetype defining card, I wouldn't really say is Leech. I would say is probably Nebula, and then as we get down into like Professor X towards the bottom here, we do see a pretty high tick up for Nebula and White Widow and Professor X and Cannonball. All of these saw a noteworthy increase this week, obviously all played in one particular deck. I do think we also see, I wanted to talk about this. Did I talk about this yet? I may have, but Nocturne seeing a 10% increase is interesting because it's not played in any of the decks that top forward, yet it went up in value. I think it wasn't played in this. Hold on, I gotta fact check myself now, right? Nocturne was not played in this lockdown deck by Luke. Okay, I think some people will play it in this one, but we did not see that in this event. So I think that's why Nocturne did trend up a little bit. I'm still not super impressed with the card. I didn't really do like a season review this season. My main issue with Nocturne is just that in changing a location, it's really good against Limbo, but if you're changing basically any other location, then it's just so much worse than compared to like a Vision or even like a Nightcrawler, because if you can move into it, then you've just changed it and now your opponent can also move into it as well. So it doesn't really work out the same way that other move cards do. And just becomes very, very interesting and hard to use for that specific reason. We do see a really sharp downturn. I won't say really sharp. I mean, Blink is still pretty high as like the third most highly represented archetype card, if we want to count Loki, Professor X / Cannonball, and then Blink as basically the third one. I guess it's actually more represented than Professor X, right? So Blink still doing pretty well as far as the percentage that are playing it. It did not put any copies in the top 4 this week. And remember, this is Blink with Leech. So we're kind of seeing both ends of that. We're seeing, yes, people have the ability to blink away their leeches, but your own Blink can also get leeched. So similar thing, they're kind of like really good together, same as Jeff and Professor X. They're really good together, but they also kind of stop each other a little bit too. What are some other noteworthy things? We already kind of talked about Cannonball. Domino went from 2 copies last week to 7, and a nice little uptick from that. We also see Killmonger go down, one of the biggest downshifts, despite actually making the top 4 this week, and not only making the top 4, but like I said, it was Nebula, and I mean, just a lot of people. Nebula, one of the most played cards this week, right here at a 10% increase. So everybody was adding Nebulas to their deck while cutting Killmongers, and Thanos, of course, also on the top. And let's see what else was interesting. We see some, like Black Knight coming into it, some Legions coming into it. Nothing super interesting here. Onslaught and then Death both being cut, and then Baron Zemo. Nobody really interested in the Baron Zemo of it all. Only 3 copies across the whole tournament. Craven, people have disregarded the move strategies and the Patriot strategies. Patriot actually did really, really well last week. Ultron specifically might be at an awkward spot in Patriot when everybody is leeching, but then your Ultron just gets buffed up by Patriot, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, we do see Ultron definitely tick down a little bit, and then Iron Lad. I mentioned earlier that the Spectrum list only had 1 on reveal card in it in Spectrum, but it also had Iron Lad and 2 copies, one of which made the top 4. So Iron Lad still probably better than this play rate deserves. And we saw almost no Serra. So that's another thing, like Sarah players kind of just gravitating over towards Loki rather than trying to make Sarah work. What else do we got here? Oh, these are all the cards that were played some last week and then totally cut out this week. No Living Tribunal, no Leader, no Invisible Woman. All right, so I think we basically covered everything here in the shift section. The Killmonger and Iron Lad had the biggest downshifts despite not being in the top 4 last week and being in the top 4 this week, so that's always interesting to see. And then the biggest uptick is going to be any of the cards in those lockout strategies, and then also just a little bit of Domino, and now people have better lists for Sage, so we're seeing Sage pop up a little bit more. One thing, I have not actually looked at the data by this metric, but I'm just kind of curious. So what if we do like appearances and then we sort by mana cost here, or oh yeah, this is always just going to sort. Yeah, you can never just sort by cost. Maybe I'll make that a feature in a previous thing, but we can just kind of see like basic sections. Oh, and apologies if there's been anything off the bottom that I didn't scroll down far enough, but I'm trying to make this big enough so that like you can still see it on a mobile device or anything. Also, apologies for the green screen. I'm ironing out some things and I have to literally iron out the green screen probably. I just bought it and took it out of the box. But we can see the #1 most played 1 cost card, that's going to be Nebula, right? Oh, no, it was Kitty Pryde. Yeah, duh. Kitty Pryde up at the top, and Quinjet and Nebula, and then Snowguard pretty close to follow. #2, that one looks like it's going to be a tie for Angela and, oh no, it's Jeff. It's Jeff. Yep, Jeff is the most played #2 or most played 2 cost card. Is it Agent Coulson in spot #3? No, it's Mobius. My memory is terrible. It's funny. I'm like remembering some things and then I'm just totally blanking on some other things. 4 is going to be Shang-Chi, and then 5. What is 5? Is that Cannonball? No, it's Blink. It's Blink. All right, so 5 we have Blink, and then 6 will be a clear win from Red Hulk, which just kind of dominates the 6 cost cards right now. We also see Doctor Doom as sort of like the opposite, and we've seen this a lot in the past too, where Doctor Doom plays counter to Goliath or Red Hulk or Blob, being like the 3 win a lane 6 cost cards, and then Doctor Doom just being the opposite, being like, I'm going to put a little bit power in all 3 locations, and by putting both of those in your deck, which the Blink decks currently do, then you kind of get it from both angles. So we do see a little bit of play here from Doctor Doom, and then also Magneto, still kind of repping it, still rocking it. We saw Magneto in that first place list, but Red Hulk definitely supreme over the other 6 cost cards at the moment. I thought this would be a fun way to wrap up here, just looking at the best decks on Untapped and then seeing what beats those using their matchups matrix. So on top, we've got Bounce and Lockdown, as well as Nomura, but Nomura's a little bit tricky to call like one archetype because these are 2 totally different decks that just have Nomura in common. So Untapped does that a little bit when a card first comes out, but we'll first look at just Bounce and Lockdown, and we can see Lockdown also incorporating the Red Hulk here. But if we put both of those into the matchups matrix, we can see which decks are going to beat both of those. We do see Nomura, but again, that's kind of funky. Destroy having pretty good win rates against both of them, as well as Blink. So both Destroy and Blink having slightly higher ceilings, I think, than Lockdown and Bounce. Lockdown does have some ways to interact with a Destroy deck, like you could use Professor to shut them off. However, some of the ways that you interact, including White Widow and Green Goblin, just get eaten up by Carnage. So those really aren't great. And then also Nebula. And you know what? Actually, a huge part of this is just Killmonger. Just Killmonger being able to destroy both of these decks right now. So Killmonger, despite seeing less play in the tournament, I think it's actually pretty telling that if something sees less play, but then actually has a better performance than previous weeks. Actually, sorry, Killmonger was right here. Yeah. Sees less play, but then pretty good performance. It's a pretty good indicator that it's a good card in the metagame right now. So I might be looking to play some Killmonger. It's good against the move Namora decks. I mean, it also blows up Black Knight, so why not? But it's good against the move Namora decks if they are putting a bunch of stats onto Nightcrawler, so that can be good as well. Blink also just goes over the top, and then I think I also saw Move as a good deck against both of these, though Move was really just no, I don't know. This is its own deck. I do wonder if some Namora data is getting into this Move data though as well, and that's really just that. But that's going to be that for today's video. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven, and here's some information on my upcoming giveaway. I was just kind of figuring out the details, and what I'm going to do is just do giveaways here in the YouTube comments. Leave a comment on this video and you are eligible to win a few different prizes. I've got 7 different prizes to give away, so I think I'm going to do 2 prizes a week. I've got 500 credits. I've got 4 copies of that to give away. 2 premium mystery variants, and then 1,000 gold is another prize, which is basically just a premium mystery variant, and then you get 200 extra gold. So those are all of the goodies that I have to give away from being a Marvel Snap content creator. And then the 1,000 gold was actually a Discord contest that I won, and I'm just going to pay that forward by giving that away to somebody watching here. And I will also do 1 giveaway on Twitter, like a like and retweet and follow thing. So we'll do 2 of those prizes randomly each week, and then 1 prize will go into the Twitter giveaway as well. So that is going to be it for me here today. Thank you guys very much for watching and for commenting and following and supporting and all of that jazz. That is part of the reason that I have now been able to work on a video for the official Marvel Snap channel. Should be coming out within the next few days. So look forward to that as well. But for today, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.